Alright, now we're gonna do the sequel, Dr. Sleep. So we continue on from 1980. Got this little girl named Victoria, she's just playing around or whatever, and then she meets this lady by the name of Rose. She's sitting around playing with flowers, and all of a sudden, we see her being surrounded by a bunch of people. It's like 7 of them niggas. Then Victoria ends up getting captured. Or Violet, that was her name. Then we get the scene with Danny and Wendy. And this takes place right after they left the hotel. You know, in The Shining. So at this point, they're basically just chilling in the house, and all of a sudden, like, Danny keeps having these nightmares. And he's trying to go to the bathroom, but he can't go in there because there's a particular ghost that's inside the bathroom. It was the ghost of the chick that was in the hotel at room 237. Yeah, remember when he told the story about Grady, how he killed all his kids and his ex-wife? Now, throughout everything that happened in the first one, somehow, she's the only one that follows him out through all this. Next thing we know, Wendy's taking Danny through the park, and Danny goes to sit on a park bench. All of a sudden, he starts talking to Mr. Holder, and I'm like, oh shit. Now, we learned from the first movie, he was definitely killed. He's now a ghost. And then Mr. Holder gives us backstory of how he's kind of similar to Danny, about how his father used to beat on him and his mom. The bottom line is, he ends up giving him this box. I guess some type of box that traps souls or whatever like that. Bottom line, he goes back to the house, he's watching cartoons just like he was in the first one. Looney Tunes and whatnot, Bugs Bunny and all that. Then he goes in the bathroom, and he ain't scared of the ghost no more. So we get to a point where 30 years have passed by. Yeah, so now he's a grown man. He ends up waking up next to this chick that was naked, giving her the business. So apparently this one particular situation, he was in a bar. He ended up fighting this dude. This girl was all up on him. And that's how he got where he was at. And he must have did a line of coke and stuff too. He's been drinking all this stuff. The thing is, when he wakes up, he realized that he don't have no money in his wallet. He must have used his money to buy the coke. So the thing is, while she's asleep, he ends up checking her wallet. And she got dough. But as he's about to leave, we see a little kid coming out another door or whatever. He starts crying. He basically puts her in the bed with him. Her. And then Mr. Holdren starts talking to him a little bit. He's like, man, she got a kid. Come on, dude. What you doing? He thought about it for a minute, but he still left out with the money. So at that point, we're like, this guy here. Now we go to this scene in the movie theater where Rose is with her main guy. We call it Crow Daddy. And she's watching this random chick named Andy at work. I think she's like 15 or something. Now her particular power is controlling people's minds, and whatever she asks them to do, they'll do it. Now some old guy was trying to go on a date with her or whatever like that, but then she made him go to sleep and act like she was putting bite marks on people's necks and whatnot. And then she would leave them there and go about their business. Oh, and take their money too. So Rose likes her work, and they basically kidnap her. But the thing is, they basically just want to recruit her. So what exactly do these people do, and what happened to Violet? Basically, they suck the shine out of people, you know, the steam and whatnot. Now, from what we learned that a lot of people have shine, but a lot of people don't know they have it. The ones that do are probably very powerful. They basically kill their victims and suck the shine out of them. So why do they do this? To keep on living and maintain their youth. We found out the old man in the bunch, the grandpa, he's been around since like Viking times and shit. The only thing is, they have to spare some of the shine at times. They gotta put them in containers. Because there's not a lot of people out there that have strong shine powers. And they gotta be able to ration it because, you know, they could die eventually if they don't. Niggas need to eat. Then we get this cut scene with this lady by the name of Abra. A little girl named Abra. Like abracadabra, yeah. But you know, she's just chilling with her mom and dad and whatnot. They're having this like little magic show and whatnot. Now this guy doing things like pulling rabbits out of hats. He's got like spoons sticking out of him and out. Keep the spoon scene. Abra keeps saying, I can do that. I can do magic tricks too. So when the parents go back in the house, they see like forks and knives all on the ground, and they look up. It's freaking spoons connected to the ceiling. I'm like, the fuck? But they're not tied to anything. They're just floating up there. And then when Abra stops concentrating, all the spoons fall, letting you know that Abra's got some powers. So we get back to Danny. Apparently, he's trying to make something of himself. He ends up going to like New Hampshire, and he sees this like little train setup or whatever like that. Then he runs into this guy by the name of Billy. And we don't really know why Billy trusts him so much, but bottom line, he trusts him to the point where he's able to get him in his own apartment, as long as he works for him or whatever like that. Hell, even Danny doesn't know why he would do it. Bottom line, he gives himself a spot though. But the spot working with the train is basically like some temporary stuff. Meanwhile, we see this little ceremony with Rose, and we found out that Andy was officially recruited to the crew. So Danny also wants to stop drinking too. So, you know what I mean? He goes to ask Billy for help, and then he takes him to a like, AA meeting. Now, the thing about this is we're glad he's getting help, but I think the alcohol was actually suppressing his shine powers. So he wouldn't see ghosts and stuff like that no more. So without that, all that stuff's going to come right back. So he's talking to one of the administrators and whatnot. And then he lets him know about this watch that he was looking for or whatever like that. That's on the soap dispensary. And he's thinking to himself, how the fuck do you know about that? But the dude thinks Danny's a good guy, whatever like that. And for some reason, he's still kind of overlooked it. But he was talking to him about a job, and he actually sets him up to be like one of those caregivers or whatever. So at this job, he's usually working at night. It's just him usually chilling with this cat by the name of Ozzy. Then Ozzy ends up going in one of the doors. And you got one of the patients that's basically saying he's about to die. He's about to die. But the crazy thing is, Ozzy always goes to a patient where they're about to die and then sits on their bed. I'm like, fuck. But he lets Danny know it's usually a tradition around here. Like, that's what Ozzy does. I'm like, man, that's crazy. So he stays with him to the end and gives some powerful, profound, like, type of messages and stuff. And they show us a couple of times this happened since he's been there. But the patients don't even want him to bother getting the nurses or nothing like that. They know when it's time, it's time. So it gets to a point where it's like 8 years later. Danny's about to get his 8-year sobriety chip. Then he gives us a profound speech where he's talking about his dad. It's crazy. And then we see that Abra's grown up a little bit. And she could basically read people's minds. She could track down people with like a GPS in her head. But then we're still thinking to ourselves, what other powers does she have? While all that's going down, Rose and the crew, they ain't been able to get a whole bunch of good shinings lately. They get some okay ones. They haven't really reached anybody that powerful yet, you know what I'm saying, to keep their, bodies living. Then they get the sense about this one kid. Crow Daddy searched the area and he finally finds him. They end up kidnapping this kid. And basically when they're trying to suck out the shinings, it's all about pain and fear. Because that actually makes the steam and the shining stronger. And man, they all gather around, they fuck this kid up. This is bad. But the thing is, Abra's having nightmares about the stuff while it's happening. The parents are trying to figure out what's going on. She's having a nightmare, but the thing is, she's actually seeing it happen as it takes place. But the crazy thing is, she might be like 2,000 miles away from it or whatever and still feels it. So that should give you an indication how much her power stretches out. And then when Rose tells her around, we're like, oh shit, Rose sensed it. So now she knows somebody powerful as Abra is out there, but the thing is, she hasn't located a position yet. Abra cut it off before she could find it. So after Rose and the crew finished off the baseball kid, they buried him with his glove in his hand. Now the glove is going to be key, but I'm going to tell you about that in a minute. So now they got a new prime target to try to find Abra. So meanwhile, Abra the next day, she's going to school. She's in middle school right now. But instead, she skips that and ends up going to the library. So what is she looking up? Missing kids. So she finds information on the baseball kid, or his name was Williams or something like that. We're just going to call him Williams. So she gets some information and she somehow taps into Dan's head. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention sometime when Dan comes home from work, somebody writes a message on the wall saying hello, and then he'll respond back and say hi. It's like random messages. So now I'm thinking to myself, Abra was the one that was doing it the whole time. But if she could tap into people's minds, then somehow having to be able to even write it down on a wall wouldn't even make much sense, right? I think she learned that skill over time. But anyway, so basically while Dan was at work and he was doing his train stuff, Abra set out on a mission to find Dan. They sit on the bench and start talking, and she explains everything that happened to the baseball kid, or William. But instead of trying to help, Dan is like, look, man, these people are dangerous. So you gotta stay out of sight, stay out of mind. And he apologizes saying that he couldn't help. Because he's having a hard time even controlling his powers, you know what I'm saying, now that he's not drinking no more. So she gets back home and gets to a point where Dan goes to work, you know what I'm saying, he ends up meeting up with Mr. Holleran after walking into one of the empty rooms. And apparently they haven't spoken to each other in 8 years. He gives him a final message that tells him, you have to help Abra. He's like, technically you owe a debt. And eventually they're gonna have to come and collect. So he basically talks Dan into helping out Abra. There's this crazy scene where Abra is sitting in her room. She's doing her mind powers and she taps into Rose's mind. At that point, Rose is actually at the grocery store. The scene is so freaking crazy, yo. They're trying to get into each other's minds that Abra breaks away at the last minute. And then the glass shatters near the milk aisle and whatnot. And then Rose is all on the ground. It's crazy. And Rose is thinking to herself, she never had no power like this. She's like, yeah, I gotta have that now. So Danny finally opens up his mind and Abra reaches out to him and then, they're about to help each other now. And she basically tells him, like, look, I need his glove, the baseball kid's glove. Because all the crew members touched it or whatever like that. And once she gets that in her possession, she can locate all these niggas. Don't ask me how. So while that's going on, Rose is trying to tap into the area of where Abra could be. And this scene is crazy. It's like when she's going into her own mind, it's like she's actually looking down on the earth, just like flying, floating across or whatever like that. But basically, this is all in her head. So finally, Rose doesn't find the house. We're like, oh shit, she found the location. She goes into her room. And then she sees her sleeping or whatever like that. But then she turns around and see all these like file cabinets. So basically these like mental file cabinets with like things that are taking place in her mind. She tries to dig through one, but then her hand gets slammed into one of them. I'm like, oh snap. Abra was wide awake, basically crushing the fuck out of her hand, was like, yeah, I got a magic trick up my sleeve too. She basically set a trap for Rose and ended up ripping off the skin of her hand for real. Rose wakes back up and now she's pissed off. But now she figured out where her house is. So we're like, oh boy. So now Danny goes to talk to Billy or whatever like that after finding out the information. He's like, look, Billy, I just need you to believe me with the hardest level of ability you can. So he gets Billy to go on this trip and basically they're going to go find a spot where the baseball kid William was buried at. While he's doing this, he's actually talking to Abby in her mind and Billy's just thinking to himself like, is this shit really happening? So they go to this spot and while they're digging, Billy tells this story about a deer because he used to go hunting. He said all of a sudden the deer disappeared and then like, not even a whole day went by, but it smelled like days of decay or whatever when they found it. He said the smell was so toxic, that was the day he stopped hunting. He's like, whatever's buried here in this spot has the same fucking smell. So they kept on digging. They did find the baseball kid. Billy was kind of believing him at first, but now he really believes him because now he got proof. They basically get the glove and then head back. So as far as Abra goes, she ends up talking to her mom. Now her mom was supposed to be going to visit her grandma. And she kind of knows what her daughter's about, but not technically and not really. So that's why she's not at the house, because she's at the grandma's house. It's just her and her dad. Now Danny and Bill come to the house, and of course the dad's not having that shit until Abby shows him some stuff in his mind or whatever like that. And now the dad believes him. So they're gonna get a plan to lure all of Rosie's goons that are coming or whatever like that. So Crow Daddy's leading the crew because Crow Daddy said he don't want Rosie coming because she's not fully aware of what capabilities and stuff like that had happened to her. And then, you know what I'm saying, that was the first time anybody ever got the best of Rosie. So she's gonna be watching from afar. So now our crew was coming up with this plan. So now Andy and the rest of the crew meet up in this daggone forest where they see Abra at. So you know what I'm saying? Andy uses her power of persuasion powers to make sure she's sitting still. Meanwhile, they about to inject her with something. Turns out that's not even her on the park bench, ends up being a stuffed teddy bear. And then Danny and Bill come out of nowhere, they start shooting the guns, they start lighting niggas up. So you think of yourself, where'd they get guns from? Well, apparently when Bill stopped hunting, he still kept his rifles and stuff like that. So there you go. They all got lit up. She ended up hiding in this little tractor trailer. Danny was about to come shoot, but he ran out of bullets. So when she came back out, she was trying to get him to go to sleep, but obviously Danny has powers. His powers of persuasion was fighting her words. Then she was about to finish off Danny, all of a sudden Bill came out of nowhere, banged off on her. But right before she was about to die, she told Bill to kill himself. And Danny couldn't stop at the time. Bill blew his fucking head off. I'm like, oh my God. So after all this, we realized, like, yeah, they was getting taken out, but wait a minute, one person's missing. Crow Daddy ended up coming to the house and knocking out Abra and killing her father in the process. Danny comes back to the house, obviously it's too late. And the thing is, Crow Daddy ended up drugging Abra, so the drug basically limits her shine powers. So he's basically gonna take her to Rose and then they're gonna do what they do. Now Danny ends up having an idea. He used his powers of hearing and meditation or whatever like that to be able to find Abra. He found her in the car. Now Danny's got this trick. He basically enters Abra's mind and starts talking for her. He ends up somehow gaining control of the will through the power of the mind, right? And sent Crow Daddy flying through the windshield after hitting a tree. Because of his immortality, he just thought to himself, I ain't gonna put on no seatbelt. Well, now he's done dead as shit. So basically, the only one left of the crew is Rose. So Rose gets desperate. She starts drinking up all the rest of the shine that she had in containers over the years. She takes all that shit too. So now it becomes a situation where Abra meets back up with Danny. And Danny says, yeah, we can't fight her one-on-one and not in this territory. So he's thinking there's only one place I could think of. We're going back to the hotel. Because as dangerous as it is for them, it's dangerous for her too. Back to the hotel where it all started. So as they're driving on the road, Abra gets a call from her mom. She's back at the house to see her, her husband did his shit. All Abra says, I love you, and hangs up the phone. And then she ends up tossing the phone out the window or whatever. Because, yeah, you don't want nobody being around for this shit. So after a while of driving, they finally make it back to the Overlook Hotel. So what's Danny's plan right now? He wants Abra to stay in the car to keep the car running. Danny's got to go in the hotel, to get it powered back up and liven up again. He tells him it's going to take a minute. Her job is to let her know when Rose is here. So he's going back through all the rooms and you get that sense of nostalgia, you know what I'm saying? He goes back in the room that they were in, back with his father and dad were, Wendy and Jack. And both of the doors still got the open holes where Jack was using the axe on that shit. This hotel's pretty much been closed down for like 40 years. You see the scene where he's looking through the background. Did we get the flashback of his mom being scared because Jack was coming? Now, when he first went in, he went into the boiler room at first. There's a reason for that. Then after checking all these rooms, you get this the flashback of like the dining room where Jack had his typewriter, was still sitting right there. He goes through all the rooms and finally he ends up going into the gold room. Sits down at the bar, and now he's talking to Floyd, the bartender. But he keeps insisting that it's his dad. And that scene was so fucking crazy, yo. He's questioning whether to take a drink or not. But obviously we know he's talking to nobody. This part is not even real. And then Abra lets him know that Rosie's here. Rose is here, my bad. Abra runs into the hotel. Do you see Rose staring at it? She started going through certain rooms. Then she's walking past it. Then we get the effect that we had in the first movie. Yeah, where the blood looks like it's rushing through the room next to the escalator and all that. It's crazy. Elevator. Then she walks around to the living room and finally she's staring at Abra and Danny got an axe in his hand. I'm like, yeah. So they got this thing where both of them are entering into Rose's mind and they put her in the maze. Yeah. That little flower bush maze from part one. Yeah. And then like Abra's playing around with her. She ends up cutting her back and forth, like slicing through her real quick. Now that's supposed to make her slightly a little bit weaker because she's feeling pain, not necessarily fear, for all the shine that she possesses. But then she ends up catching Abra. But the thing is, Abra's actually supposed to be a diversion because Danny's about to put Rose in the damn coffin. Rose like, fuck that shit. She snaps out of it. So while he's telling Abby to run and get away, it's the beef one-on-one, Danny and Rose. So what happens is Rose ends up getting the best of Danny. She ends up giving him a cut on his leg as he falls down those familiar steps. And she's like digging into his leg, giving him pain, and she starts sucking up some of the shine that he's got. You get to that point, she's feeling like, oh, she's feeling oh so powerful right now. But then there's a last-ditch effort. In his mind, he releases all the coffins that he collected over the years. Turns out it's a lot of the people that you've seen from the hotel. And then they all go straight at the Rose, collecting her shine, and then she's done deal daddy shit. But then afterwards, he can't close it back. So basically, they all turn around and start snacking on Danny. It's like, oh shit. So now Abra's running around, but the thing is, she ends up going into a certain room, 237. She ends up seeing the crazy lady in the bathtub, but then Danny somehow ends up finding her. But the thing is, Danny ain't Danny no more. But she uses her powers to get him back to normal, but it's only for a brief couple of seconds. That way she's able to make her escape. So she ends up escaping, getting out of the hotel. Danny ends up going to the boiler room. So now the thing is, the pressure and the heat's been rising because that's exactly what Danny did in the first place. He's basically going to light the whole goddamn hotel on fire. See, the ghost part of Danny was struggling to try to turn it off or not. But Danny couldn't pull himself to do that. Instead, he stayed down there in the boiler room, and then everything started lighting on fire. And then we get this glimpse of him when he was little and standing next to his mom, Wendy. So the thing is, his mom, Wendy, died when he was 20. They never really said exactly from what, though. But they had talked about it when Danny was at the table talking to Floyd or his dad or whatever. And they basically said they lived in Florida for a while because the fact is, they don't never want to see snow again. Not all the snow they dealt with when he was little back in the first movie. So while Abra was waiting outside, the bottom line is, Danny never left the boiler room, and the entire freaking hotel got burnt up to flames. Next day, we see Abra's back in her room, and she's talking to Danny. Basically a ghost form version of him. Kind of like how Danny used to talk to Mr. Holgram. Mr. Holleran, you know what I mean. Last thing we see is Abby talking to her mom, saying that dinner was ready. And then she finally came out and told her she was talking to Dan. But it's like mom semi-agrees with everything that Abra is saying because it's like, how can she not? She's seen a lot of proof about things. Before she goes downstairs, she's got to go to the bathroom. She goes in the bathroom and we find out the chick from 237 is still in her bathroom. She closed the door behind her like she's about to go handle that shit. Now, my whole thing is this. Of all the things that followed Danny, everything that happened at the hotel, one thing that followed him back to his own house was Grady's wife. And now it follows Abra now. Why wouldn't Grady the twins be following her? Hell, why would anybody else be following other than her? I technically didn't get that part. Other than that, check out Dr. Sleep. You already know what time it is.